The morning sun cast long shadows across the advanced long-range sniper training center as 26-year-old Anna Rothwell adjusted her rifle scope for the third time. Her hands moved with the precision of someone who understood mechanics. But her shots consistently landed in the bottom third of her class rankings. The other recruits had stopped trying to hide their snickers. Maybe engineering school didn't cover the part about actually hitting what you're aiming at. Marcus Coleman called out from the firing line next to her. The former infantry soldier had made it his personal mission to remind everyone that Anna didn't belong here. His comment drew chuckles from the other trainees who clustered around him like disciples. Anna kept her expression neutral as she chambered another round. Her long brown hair was pulled back in the same practical bun she'd worn every day for the past 6 weeks, and her lean frame remained perfectly still despite the mockery. What her classmates didn't understand was that she wasn't trying to impress them with conventional marksmanship. She was studying something entirely different. While others focused on their scores, Anna filled notebook after notebook with calculations that had nothing to do with traditional shooting techniques. Surface angles, material density measurements, trajectory equations that accounted for environmental deflection. Her instructors assumed she was overcompensating for her civilian background with irrelevant academic theory. "Rothwell, you're holding up the line," barked Sergeant Davis, the range instructor who'd grown increasingly frustrated with her methodical approach to every exercise. "This isn't a physics classroom. Either shoot or step aside." Anna fired her final shot of the morning session. It struck the target, but nowhere near the center ring that separated elite snipers from average marksmen. As she gathered her equipment, she caught sight of her notebook lying open on the shooting bench. The first page contained physics formulas for calculating bounce trajectories, and below them, a handwritten message. "You always said nothing was impossible if you understand the underlying principles." The message was addressed to Alex, her brother who'd been killed by an enemy sniper positioned behind terrain that direct fire couldn't reach. Alex had died because conventional shooting techniques weren't enough to save him. Anna was here too. Make sure that never happened to anyone else's brother. Marcus noticed her notebook as she closed it. "What's all that math supposed to be? Your dissertation on why you can't shoot straight?" The laughter that followed echoed across the range. But Anna simply packed her materials and headed toward the classroom building. She had real work to do. That evening, while her classmates cleaned their rifles and traded war stories from their previous deployments, Anna spread topographical maps across her dormitory desk. She'd been studying the training facility's terrain for weeks, noting the composition of rocky surfaces, the angles of natural barriers, and the way different materials responded to impact. Her roommate, Jessica Torres, had stopped asking questions about the unusual research. "You know, they're saying you might not make it through the program," Jessica mentioned quietly as she prepared for lights out. Unlike the others, she hadn't joined the chorus of mockery, but her concern was genuine. "Maybe you should focus more on basic marksmanship and less on whatever all that is." Anna looked up from her calculations. Some problems require unconventional solutions. What Jessica didn't know was that Anna had applied to the military's Advanced Ballistics Research Division 3 years earlier, hoping to develop theoretical deflection techniques into practical tactical doctrine. They'd rejected her application for lacking combat shooting experience. The military wanted her engineering knowledge, but wouldn't accept her without credentials she couldn't obtain as a civilian. So Anna had chosen a different path. She'd enlisted as a regular recruit and worked her way into sniper training, where she could demonstrate her theories under controlled conditions. Her mediocre performance during standard exercises was partially intentional. She was perfecting ricochet calculations while maintaining just enough conventional accuracy to avoid elimination from the program. The final practical examination was still weeks away, but Anna knew it would include scenarios designed to test Everything they'd learned about long-range marksmanship under realistic conditions. The instructors always included at least one challenge that seemed impossible to solve with direct fire. That's when she would show them what she'd really been working on. In her ammunition case, separated from the standard training rounds, lay a single silver bullet engraved with a personal message. Final bounce for Alex. It represented 3 years of theoretical work and personal dedication to solving a problem the military considered unsolvable. Soon, everyone would understand why she'd been aiming away from the targets they expected her to hit. 2 weeks before the final examination, the training intensified with complex scenarios designed to separate elite snipers from those who'd simply learned to shoot accurately. Anna's performance remained consistently mediocre, placing her in the bottom quarter of a class that had already lost 8 recruits to the demanding program. "I'm starting to think Rothwell signed up for the wrong military specialty," commented Lieutenant Morrison during the daily briefing. The comment wasn't malicious, but it carried the weight of professional assessment. Sniper training requires natural shooting talent that can't be taught through engineering textbooks. Marcus seized the opening like a predator sensing weakness. Maybe she thought this was summer camp for people who like looking through scopes. The group of trainees surrounding him erupted in laughter, their voices carrying across the morning assembly area where everyone could hear. Anna accepted the criticism without defending herself, but she noticed Jessica Torres watching the exchange with growing discomfort. After dismissal, Jessica approached her with obvious concern. "You're letting them walk all over you," Jessica said as they headed toward the equipment shed. "Why don't you ever fight back? I've seen your test scores from the academic portions. You're smarter than all of them combined." "Intelligence and ego aren't the same thing," Anna replied, checking her rifle's scope alignment with mechanical precision. "Their opinions don't change the physics." What Jessica didn't understand was that Anna needed her classmates to underestimate her capabilities. The final examination would include challenges that conventional marksmanship couldn't solve, and her success would be more convincing if nobody expected it. During theoretical classes about environmental obstacles and indirect fire solutions, topics most students considered boring academic material, Anna asked questions that revealed her unusual perspective. When the instructor discussed barrier penetration, she inquired about controlled ricochet trajectories and surface angle calculations. If a bullet impacts limestone at a 67-degree angle with moist soil behind it, could we theoretically control the deflection path? She asked during one lecture. The entire class erupted in laughter at what struck them as absurdly theoretical speculation. The instructor dismissed her question without providing a serious answer, treating it as evidence of her civilian naivety about real-world shooting. But Sergeant Davis, the range instructor, had begun noticing something unusual about Anna's training routine. While other students focused on improving their accuracy and speed, she spent extra time studying the facility's terrain features. She examined rock compositions, measured surface angles, and filled notebooks with calculations that seemed unrelated to marksmanship fundamentals. Rothwell spends more time with her calculator than her rifle, Davis mentioned to Lieutenant Morrison after observing her peculiar training methods. "I've never seen a recruit approach shooting like it's an engineering problem." Morrison shrugged off the concern. "Some people need to overanalyze everything. She either figure it out or wash out during the final exam." Meanwhile, Anna continued her unconventional preparation. Her notebook contained more physics calculations than shooting tips, pages filled with trajectory equations and material density, measurements that other students assumed were irrelevant academic exercises. Marcus discovered her notes one afternoon when she'd left her materials on the shooting bench during a bathroom break. He held up her notebook for the other trainees to see, reading her calculations in a mocking voice. "Listen to this, guys. She's got formulas for calculating bounce angles and surface deflection coefficients. Is she planning to ricochet bullets? Off the moon? The group around him laughed harder as he flipped through pages of mathematical analysis that meant nothing to their combat-trained minds. Anna returned to find her notebook being passed around like entertainment. She retrieved it calmly without showing any emotion. But Jessica Torres had witnessed the entire incident. That evening, she confronted Anna about the persistent harassment. "They're treating you like a joke, and you're just taking it," Jessica said with obvious frustration. "Why don't you report them to the instructors? This has gone beyond normal." Training competition. Anna looked up from her calculations with those sharp, calculating eyes that seemed to analyze everything they encountered. Because in 2 weeks, none of their opinions will matter anymore. The confidence in her voice surprised Jessica, who'd been expecting another philosophical response about patience and preparation. For the first time since arriving at the training facility, Anna sounded like someone who possessed a secret advantage that her tormentors couldn't understand. "What happens in 2 weeks?" Jessica asked. "The final examination includes scenarios where conventional techniques don't work," Anna explained. "That's when they'll discover that understanding physics isn't the same as being weak." Jessica studied her roommate's expression and realized that the months of mockery and mediocre performance might have been more calculated than anyone suspected. Anna Rothwell wasn't struggling with sniper training. She was preparing for something entirely different. The harassment reached its peak during the final week of training, when Marcus Coleman decided that Anna's continued presence in the program was personally offensive to his military pride. He'd been building resentment for months, viewing her civilian background and theoretical approach as disrespectful to combat veterans who'd earned their places through battlefield experience. "I can't believe they're going to let Rothwell take the final exam," Marcus announced during evening chow, his voice loud enough to carry across the mess hall. "She's going to embarrass the entire program when real military assessors see her scores." His audience of loyal followers nodded in agreement, but their criticism had evolved beyond simple mockery. They'd begun actively sabotaging Anna's training. Opportunities, claiming the best shooting positions before she could access them, and spreading rumors about her. Incompetence to instructors from other programs thought the breaking point came during a complex training exercise designed to simulate real combat conditions. Students were assigned to teams of 2, with one acting as spotter while the other took difficult shots under time pressure. Marcus ensured that Anna was paired with him, claiming he wanted to help her succeed in front of the observing instructors. Instead, he provided intentionally incorrect range estimates and wind readings, causing Anna to miss shots that she should have completed easily. When she attempted to make her own calculations, he overruled her with false confidence that impressed the watching Sergeant Davis. "Trust me, Rothwell. I've been doing this since before you knew which end of a rifle to hold," Marcus declared as he fed her another deliberately wrong calculation. "The range is exactly 800 meters, wind from the northeast at 15 knots. Anna's shot missed by nearly a full meter, striking rocks to the right of the intended target. The watching instructors exchanged glances that suggested her elimination from the program was being seriously considered. Marcus's satisfied smirk confirmed that the sabotage had been intentional. But something unexpected happened as Anna's bullet ricocheted off the rocky surface. The deflected round continued traveling at a reduced velocity, following a trajectory that curved around the primary barrier and struck a secondary target, hidden behind cover. The electronic scoring system immediately registered "target eliminated" with confused beeping sounds. "What just happened?" asked Lieutenant Morrison, who'd been observing from the instructor platform with obvious bewilderment. "Sergeant." Davis examined the electronic displays with growing amazement. Her bullet missed the assigned target but eliminated the concealed one behind the barrier. The computer is registering a successful engagement. Anna maintained perfect composure despite the shocked expression surrounding her, but Marcus felt a chill of unease creeping up his spine. The ricochet had looked almost intentional, as if she'd planned for the bullet to miss the primary target and continue toward the hidden one. "Lucky bounce," he muttered, trying to dismiss what everyone had witnessed. Jessica Torres, who'd been watching from the observation area, noticed something that the others had missed. Anna hadn't shown any surprise when her missed shot found its secondary target. If anything, she'd looked satisfied with the result. That evening, Jessica confronted Anna about the unusual incident during the training exercise. "That ricochet wasn't an accident, was it? You knew exactly where that bullet was going." Anna closed her notebook and looked at her roommate with those calculating eyes that seemed to analyze every detail of their conversation. "Sometimes the most direct path to your target isn't a straight line." "You mean you can actually control where bullets go after they bounce?" Jessica asked with growing amazement. "Is that what all those calculations have been about?" "Physics doesn't change because we're on a shooting range instead of in a laboratory," Anna explained. "If you understand material properties and angular momentum, deflection becomes predictable rather than random." Jessica realized that everything she'd witnessed over the past months suddenly made sense. Anna's mediocre conventional shooting, her obsessive study of terrain features, her notebooks filled with mathematical calculations, her calm acceptance of constant mockery. She'd been preparing for something that none of them had considered possible. "The final exam is in 3 days, Jessica said. "Are you planning to shock everyone with some kind of impossible shot?" Anna returned to her calculations without directly answering the question, but her next words carried a weight that Jessica had never heard before. "My brother died because conventional techniques couldn't reach his killer. I enlisted to make sure that never happens to anyone else's family." For the first time since arriving at the training facility, Jessica understood that Anna Rothwell wasn't just another struggling recruit trying to become a sniper. She was someone who'd spent years developing solutions to tactical problems that the military considered unsolvable. And she was about to prove that everything they thought they knew about marksmanship was incomplete. The silver bullet in Anna's ammunition case wasn't just a memorial to her brother Alex. It represented the moment when theoretical physics would become practical battlefield innovation. With 48 hours remaining before the final examination, Anna's true preparation began to emerge from months of careful concealment. While her classmates focused on last-minute practice with conventional marksmanship techniques, she conducted her own private training sessions that revealed the sophisticated nature of her alternative approach. Jessica Torres discovered the extent of Anna's preparation by accident when she returned to their dormitory early from evening chow. Anna was arranged on the floor studying detailed topographical maps of the training facility, surrounded by physics textbooks, ballistics charts, and environmental data that she'd been collecting for months. "This isn't normal study material for sniper training," Jessica observed, examining charts that showed surface composition analysis and ricochet probability, calculations for different types of terrain throughout the facility. Anna looked up from her work with an expression that mixed determination with something approaching satisfaction. Normal techniques solve normal problems. When normal techniques aren't sufficient, you need to understand the underlying principles well enough to develop new approaches. Jessica studied the maps more carefully and realized they contained markings that indicated optimal bounce angles, material density measurements, and trajectory calculations for every major terrain feature on the training grounds. Anna had essentially created a deflection targeting system for the entire facility. "How long have you been working on this?" Jessica asked with growing amazement. 3 years of theoretical development," Anna replied. 6 months of practical preparation since arriving here. The mathematics were established before I enlisted, but applying them required understanding this specific environment. The revelation explained everything Jessica had observed but hadn't understood. Anna's questions during academic sessions, her extra time studying terrain features, her notebooks filled with calculations, her calm acceptance of mockery from classmates who couldn't comprehend what she was actually accomplishing. Meanwhile, Marcus Coleman sensed that something had changed in the dynamics of their training group. Anna's demeanor during the final week carried a subtle confidence that hadn't been present during previous months. She no longer seemed affected by criticism or concerned about her conventional shooting scores. "Rothwell's been acting weird lately," Marcus mentioned to his group of supporters during their evening gathering. "Almost like she thinks she's going to surprise everyone during the final exam." "Maybe she's delusional," suggested Tommy Williams, another former infantry soldier who joined Marcus in tormenting Anna throughout the program. "People crack under pressure differently. Some get desperate and start imagining they're better than they actually are." But Sergeant Davis had begun noticing subtle changes in Anna's training approach that suggested something more sophisticated than desperation. During the final practice sessions, she'd started making scope adjustments that seemed to point away from assigned targets, as if she was aiming at completely different locations. "Rothwell's scope settings don't match her target assignments," Davis mentioned to Lieutenant Morrison during their daily instructor briefing. "Either she's completely confused about basic targeting, or she's preparing for something we don't understand." Morrison reviewed Anna's training records with growing puzzlement. Her academic scores and theoretical courses were exceptional, ranking in the top 5% of all students who'd completed the program. Her practical shooting scores were consistently mediocre, placing her near the bottom of the current class. "Exceptional theoretical knowledge, average practical application," Morrison concluded. "It's unusual, but not unprecedented. Some students understand the science better than they can execute the techniques." What neither instructor realized was that Anna's practical shooting scores were intentionally average. She'd been maintaining just enough conventional accuracy to avoid elimination, while perfecting calculations and techniques that had nothing to do with traditional marksmanship training. On the evening before the final examination, Anna made an unusual request to the facility's technical staff. She asked for detailed environmental data about the next day's testing conditions, including wind patterns, humidity levels, and terrain composition information that most students never considered relevant. "That's an odd request from someone who's been struggling with basic shooting," commented the technical specialist who provided the requested data. "Most students focus on equipment checks and mental preparation, not environmental analysis." Anna accepted the information without explaining her intentions, but Jessica Torres understood that her roommate was completing the final phase of preparation for something that none of their instructors expected. The months of mockery and mediocre performance had been carefully calculated to conceal the development of techniques that could revolutionize how the military approached impossible shooting scenarios. The silver bullet, inscribed "Final Bounce for Alex," represented more than personal memorial. It symbolized the moment when Anna would demonstrate that understanding physics thoroughly enough could create tactical possibilities that conventional training never addressed. Tomorrow, everyone would discover that the engineer who couldn't shoot straight had actually been learning to shoot around corners. The final examination began at dawn with testing conditions, deliberately designed to challenge everything the students had learned about long-range marksmanship under realistic combat scenarios. 23 recruits lined up on the firing line, their months of training about to be evaluated under pressure that would determine their military futures. Lieutenant Morrison explained the parameters of the ultimate challenge with the clinical precision of someone who'd administered this test dozens of times. Your final target is concealed behind solid cover at a distance of 1.6 kilometers. Environmental conditions include strong crosswinds and irregular terrain that creates unpredictable air currents. Success requires everything you've learned about precision shooting under adverse conditions. Anna studied the challenge through her scope and immediately understood why this particular scenario had been chosen as the program's ultimate test. The target was positioned behind concrete barriers that provided complete protection from direct fire, with no apparent angle that would allow conventional line-of-sight engagement. One by one, the advanced students attempted the shot using traditional sniper techniques that had served them well throughout the program. Each approached the problem with careful wind reading, precise range calculation, and direct targeting methods that represented the finest conventional marksmanship training available. Marcus Coleman stepped up to the firing line with supreme confidence, his months of tormenting Anna temporarily forgotten in the face of demonstrating his superior combat experience. He made 2 attempts with textbook precision, adjusting for wind and elevation with the expertise that had made him a natural leader among the recruits. Both shots struck the concrete barrier harmlessly, confirming what everyone could see through their spotting scopes. The target remained completely protected behind cover that direct fire couldn't penetrate. Tommy Williams attempted a high-angle shot that might clear the obstacle, calculating trajectory adjustments that would drop his bullet into the target zone from above. His round passed over the intended area without effect, demonstrating that even creative conventional approaches couldn't solve this particular tactical problem. After 15 students had failed to complete the challenge, the observing instructors began discussing whether the test parameters might be unrealistic. Sergeant Davis expressed growing concern that they'd created a scenario that exceeded the capabilities of even exceptional marksmen. Maybe we should reconsider the difficulty level, Davis suggested to Lieutenant Morrison as they watched another failed attempt. If none of these students can complete the challenge, the problem might be with our expectations rather than their abilities. Then Anna stepped up to the firing line, and everything changed. Instead of aiming at the target or attempting variations of conventional techniques that others had tried, Anna adjusted her scope to point nearly a meter to the right toward a large rocky outcropping that had no apparent connection to the target area. The observation team watched in confusion as she made calculations that seemed completely unrelated to traditional marksmanship. "Is she aiming at the rocks?" whispered one instructor. "Maybe she's given up and just shooting randomly," suggested another. Marcus Coleman couldn't resist commenting from the observation area. "You think this is a trick shot competition, Rothwell? If you don't know how to shoot, just admit it." The laughter started when Anna's final scope adjustment pointed her rifle at what appeared to be empty terrain. From every conventional perspective, she was aiming at the wrong target entirely. Her classmates assumed she'd cracked under pressure and lost her ability to think logically about the challenge. But Jessica Torres, watching from the student observation area, noticed something that the others missed. Anna wasn't showing any signs of stress or confusion. Her breathing remained controlled, her posture maintained perfect shooting form, and her expression carried the same calculating confidence that Jessica had observed during their private conversations. Anna ignored the mockery surrounding her and methodically completed her pre-shot routine. She calculated wind drift for her unusual trajectory, maintained perfect shooting discipline despite aiming at what everyone assumed was the wrong target, and prepared to demonstrate that months of physics calculations were about to become tactical. Reality. The rifle reported with a sharp crack that echoed across the training range. Her bullet traveled the full distance and struck the rocky outcropping exactly where she had aimed. To everyone watching through spotting scopes, it appeared to be a complete miss that confirmed their assumptions about her incompetence. But 0.8 of a second later, something impossible happened. The concealed target behind the concrete barrier exploded in a shower of sparks and smoke. The electronic scoring system immediately registered. Target eliminated with bewildered electronic confirmation sounds. The training facility fell into stunned silence as instructors and students tried to comprehend what they had just witnessed. Camera footage reviewed in slow motion revealed the impossible truth that would change everything they thought they knew about marksmanship. Anna's bullet had struck the rocky surface at a precisely calculated angle, ricocheted across intervening terrain, and penetrated the target from a direction that no one had considered accessible. She had solved an impossible tactical problem through applied physics rather than conventional shooting techniques. Master Sergeant Rodriguez, the facility's chief instructor with 30 years of sniper training experience, approached the firing line with visible amazement written across his weathered features. He'd overseen thousands of training exercises, but nothing had prepared him for what he'd just witnessed. In 3 decades of training snipers, I have never seen intentional ricochet shooting, he admitted publicly, his voice carrying across the silent range where students and instructors stood in shocked bewilderment. We teach marksmanship, but you just taught us how to think. The spotter assigned to work with Anna during the exercise stood up abruptly, his voice trembling with realization. She calculated the entire bounce trajectory. She controlled the bullet through physics. Rodriguez immediately requested an emergency technical analysis of the shot by the facility's ballistics experts. 4 different specialists examined camera footage, trajectory calculations, and environmental conditions with the thoroughness typically reserved for accident investigations or equipment failures. Their unanimous conclusion challenged everything the military thought it understood about precision shooting. "This isn't luck," reported the lead analyst after 3 hours of detailed examination. "This is applied physics, used to solve a tactical problem that conventional techniques cannot address." Marcus Coleman stared at Anna with a mixture of disbelief and growing unease. The months of mockery he directed at her suddenly seemed not just inappropriate, but professionally ignorant. He'd been tormenting someone who possessed capabilities that exceeded his own understanding of marksmanship. How is that even possible? He asked, his usual arrogance replaced by confused respect. Anna provided only minimal details when asked to explain her method, speaking with the matter-of-fact tone of someone discussing routine technical procedures. "I studied the terrain, calculated surface angles, and determined the ricochet trajectory needed to reach the target zone. The physics are straightforward if you understand material properties and angular momentum." The simplicity of her explanation masked the years of theoretical preparation and practice that had led to this moment. But Rodriguez recognized that Anna's innovation extended far beyond impressive demonstration. Real combat situations frequently involve targets hidden behind cover that direct fire couldn't penetrate. "You've been working on this technique for years," Rodriguez observed, studying Anna's calm demeanor with professional insight. "Since before you enlisted." Anna nodded quietly. "Some problems require unconventional solutions." Jessica Torres finally understood why her roommate had endured months of harassment without defending herself. Anna hadn't been struggling with sniper training. She'd been developing tactical innovations while allowing everyone to underestimate her capabilities until the moment when demonstration would be more convincing than explanation. The implications of Anna's success began rippling through the facilities command structure within hours. A detailed report was immediately forwarded to Special Operations Command, where senior officers recognized the potential significance of controlled deflection techniques for modern warfare scenarios. But the most revealing information came from an unexpected source. Colonel Patricia Hayes, a senior officer who had served alongside Anna's brother Alex during his final deployment, confirmed what many had suspected about Anna's true motivation for enlisting. Anna Rothwell submitted a ricochet shooting analysis. 3 years ago, Colonel Hayes revealed to the training facility staff during an emergency conference call. She proposed controlled deflection techniques using environmental surfaces. We dismissed it as theoretical research with no practical application. The truth emerged through classified military records that had been previously overlooked. During Alex's final mission, he had been tasked with neutralizing a high-value target positioned behind massive rock formations that provided complete protection from direct fire. Multiple sniper teams had attempted the elimination using conventional techniques. All had failed. Alex's final radio transmission had included coordinates and a tactical assessment that contained an unusual note. If anyone understands how to bend physics, it would be my sister. He had been referring to Anna, who had shared her theoretical ballistics research with him during his leave periods. When Alex had submitted Anna's theoretical work to military researchers, they had rejected it with the official response: ricochet. Shooting is inherently unpredictable. Intentional deflection techniques cannot be controlled precisely enough for tactical application. The rejection had meant that Alex went into his final mission without access to the unconventional solution that might have saved his life. He had died attempting a direct shot that the terrain made impossible. Now, 3 years later, Anna had proven that the military's assessment had been wrong. Her brother's death could have been prevented if the theoretical techniques she'd developed had been taken seriously and implemented tactically. Colonel Hayes reached a sobering conclusion after reviewing the technical analysis of Anna's demonstration shot. If we had implemented her techniques 3 years ago, Alex Rothwell might still be alive. The weight of that realization transformed Anna's achievement from impressive innovation to profound tragedy that highlighted the military's failure to recognize solutions that have been available but ignored. The aftermath of Anna's demonstration created immediate changes throughout the military's sniper training and tactical development programs. Within 72 hours, researchers identified at least 12 recent combat situations where ricochet techniques could have eliminated targets that remained unreachable through conventional methods. Soldiers had died in those engagements because the military lacked tactics that Anna had already developed and repeatedly tried to share with officials who dismissed her theoretical work as impractical academic speculation. Marcus Coleman approached Anna during the post-examination debriefing with obvious discomfort and something approaching genuine remorse. The months of harassment he directed at her now seemed not just inappropriate, but professionally embarrassing. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly, his usual arrogance completely absent. "I was wrong about everything. Your methods, your preparation, your abilities. I acted like an ignorant fool." Anna accepted his apology with the same calm composure she'd maintained throughout months of mockery. But her response carried weight that Marcus would remember for the rest of his career. Conventional wisdom isn't always correct. Sometimes the most effective solution requires thinking beyond standard limitations. Jessica Torres watched the interaction with satisfaction, finally seeing her roommate receive the respect she deserved from the beginning. But Anna seemed more interested in the practical implications of her success than in personal vindication. When offered promotion to the prestigious Ballistics Research Division, along with media interviews and public recognition, Anna declined everything except the opportunity to develop training programs that would make her techniques accessible to other soldiers. "I don't shoot for recognition," she explained to Colonel Hayes during their formal meeting. "I shoot so that someone behind cover gets to live." The military began developing specialized training programs based on Anna's techniques, but they quickly discovered the challenges involved in widespread implementation. Ricochet shooting required mathematical abilities that exceeded most soldiers' educational backgrounds. Students needed to understand physics principles, calculate surface angles in real time, and maintain shooting accuracy while performing complex mental calculations. Most importantly, they needed the patience and confidence to aim away from their targets, while trusting physics to deliver bullets to intended locations. Anna volunteered to develop simplified training protocols that would make her techniques accessible to soldiers with standard educational backgrounds. She created visual aids that replaced complex calculations with practical field methods, charts showing common ricochet angles, and simple tools for measuring surface compositions. Her most significant contribution extended beyond technical instruction into changing how military personnel approached problem-solving under pressure. She taught students that when obvious approaches failed, solutions might require thinking differently about entire problems, rather than just improving execution of conventional techniques. Within 6 months, 47 soldiers demonstrated basic ricochet shooting abilities under Anna's instruction. 12 achieved advanced proficiency levels that made them tactically effective in complex scenarios that conventional training couldn't address. The real validation of Anna's work came from operational deployment rather than training exercises. Delta Force snipers operating in mountainous terrain successfully used ricochet techniques to eliminate targets that had been unreachable for weeks, preventing a humanitarian crisis that would have cost civilian lives. The mission's operational report credited advanced deflection techniques developed by engineer sniper Anna Rothwell for the successful engagement that saved both military and civilian lives through tactical innovation. But the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source when Captain James Morrison, who had served alongside Alex Rothwell during his final deployment, visited Anna at the training facility, carrying something that changed everything. "Your brother asked me to give this to you if anything happened to him," Morrison explained, presenting Anna with a letter that Alex had written but never had the chance to send. Anna read Alex's final thoughts about her research with emotions she'd kept controlled throughout months of training and harassment. "You always saw solutions where everyone else saw obstacles. If my little sister says bullets can bounce around corners, then bullets can bounce around corners. I just wish I could be there to see you prove it." Reading Alex's words, Anna understood that her work honored his memory in exactly the way he would have wanted. Not through monuments or ceremonies, but through tactical innovations that would save other soldiers' lives in situations similar to the one that had killed him. 1 year after Anna's groundbreaking demonstration, the impact of her innovation had spread throughout military operations worldwide. The specialized course she established at the military academy trained only 5 students per year, but those graduates carried her techniques into deployments where creative thinking and technical precision created tactical advantages that conventional training couldn't provide. The program's official name became Angle Point, the solutions everyone overlooks, and its unofficial motto was painted on the main training facility wall. "Not missing doesn't mean wrong." The phrase captured Anna's core teaching that conventional approaches weren't always the most effective approaches. Staff Sergeant David Martinez, one of Anna's first advanced students, returned from deployment with a letter that summarized the real-world impact of her techniques. "Your shot wasn't just for demonstration. It was the only chance for survival, and I survived." Martinez had used ricochet principles to rescue a patrol unit trapped behind enemy cover in terrain where conventional tactics would have resulted in casualties. 7 soldiers returned home, alive because someone had learned to think differently about apparently impossible tactical problems. Anna's influence extended beyond military applications into academic programs, where her case study became popular in physics courses, demonstrating how theoretical knowledge could solve real-world problems that seemed impossible using standard methods. But the most significant impact remained practical rather than academic. Military units operating in urban environments routinely used ricochet principles to neutralize threats hidden behind barriers. Special operations teams applied deflection techniques to eliminate targets in confined spaces where direct fire wasn't possible. Each successful application represented soldiers who returned home safely because someone had refused to accept that certain targets were unreachable or certain problems were unsolvable through creative application of scientific principles. 3 years after her initial demonstration, Anna received recognition from the International Physics Association, which awarded her their Applied Science Medal for developing practical applications of ballistics theory that saved lives in real-world situations. She declined to attend the ceremony, preferring to continue her teaching work at the military academy. "Recognition is nice," she told Colonel Hayes, "but the real reward is knowing that soldiers trained in these techniques are using them successfully in the field." Anna's students carried her methods into deployments worldwide, passing along techniques and problem-solving approaches that helped other personnel succeed in challenging situations that conventional training hadn't prepared them to handle. That their silver bullet inscribed for Alex remained in Anna's personal collection, never fired, but representing techniques that were used regularly by soldiers who understood that sometimes the most direct path to success required taking an indirect route. Marcus Coleman, who had tormented Anna throughout their training, became one of her most effective advocates after graduating from her advanced program. He frequently told new recruits about his experience underestimating someone whose unconventional methods proved superior to us traditional approaches. "I learned that mocking someone for doing things differently often means you're missing something important," Marcus explained during orientation sessions. "Anna Rothwell taught me that innovation comes from understanding principles so thoroughly that you can apply them in ways nobody else considered possible." Jessica Torres, who had witnessed Anna's journey from harassment to recognition, pursued her own advanced training in tactical innovation and became an instructor who emphasized creative problem-solving over conventional wisdom. The training facility's memorial wall now included a plaque commemorating Alex Rothwell with an inscription that captured the spirit of his sister's achievement. "Some problems require people who understand that the shortest distance between 2 points isn't always a straight line." Anna continued teaching, developing new applications of physics to tactical problems, and training soldiers to think creatively about challenges that seemed impossible using conventional approaches. Her students learned patience, preparation, and the confidence required to aim away from targets while trusting scientific principles to deliver successful results. But perhaps her most important contribution was philosophical rather than technical. She demonstrated that real innovation didn't come from ignoring established methods, but from understanding underlying principles so thoroughly that new applications became possible when traditional approaches failed. Anna represented everyone who had solved problems by thinking beyond standard limitations. The engineer who found structural solutions not found in textbooks. The teacher who reached struggling students through methods not in curriculum guides. The healthcare worker who treated patients using approaches that combined multiple disciplines. Her story belonged to anyone who had been dismissed as impractical because their methods seemed unconventional. Anyone whose solutions required more patience or preparation than others wanted to invest. Anyone whose approach demanded skills that others didn't possess or understand. 5 years after that transformative ricochet shot, Anna Rothwell had become something she never intended to be, a legend. But unlike most military legends built on battlefield heroics or dramatic victories, her reputation rested on something more subtle and perhaps more valuable: the ability to see solutions where others saw only obstacles. The Advanced Tactical Innovation Center that grew from her original small program now occupied an entire wing of the military academy. Students from allied nations competed for admission to courses that combined physics, engineering, and creative problem-solving with traditional military skills. Anna walked through the center's main corridor each morning, passing photographs of her graduates who had applied unconventional thinking to save lives in deployments worldwide. Their faces reminded her that innovation wasn't about personal achievement. It was about giving people options when conventional approaches failed. Professor Rothwell called Lieutenant Rebecca Hayes, Colonel Hayes' daughter, who had recently joined the program. The new recruits are asking if the ricochet story is really true, or if it's become exaggerated over time. Anna smiled at the question she heard frequently from skeptical new students. Would you like me to show them? That afternoon, Anna led the newest class of 20 students to the same range where she had first demonstrated controlled ricochet shooting. The target setup was identical to her original examination, a concealed objective, behind concrete barriers at 1.6 kilometers. Impossible to reach with direct fire. Who wants to try the conventional approach first? Anna asked. Several students volunteered, each attempting direct shots with the precision they'd learned in basic marksmanship training. All failed, exactly as expected. The concrete barriers provided complete protection from every angle they could find. Anna stepped up to the firing line and began the same methodical preparation that had shocked observers 5 years earlier. She adjusted her scope to point at rocky terrain that seemed completely unrelated to the target area, made calculations that appeared to ignore conventional targeting principles, and aimed at what still looked like the wrong location entirely. She's aiming at empty ground, whispered one of the new students. Trust the physics, Anna replied calmly, settling into her shooting position with the same confidence that had once been mistaken for delusion. The rifle cracked. Her bullet struck rocks to the right of the target zone, ricocheted across intervening terrain, and eliminated the concealed objective with the same electronic confirmation that had stunned everyone 5 years earlier. The new students stared in amazement, but Anna's demonstration served a purpose beyond impressive marksmanship. She wanted them to understand that innovation required more than following established procedures. This technique works because I spent 3 years studying physics, 6 months analyzing this specific terrain, and countless hours practicing calculations. Under pressure, Anna explained to the silent group. Innovation isn't magic. It's preparation meeting opportunity when conventional methods aren't sufficient. Lieutenant Hayes raised her hand with obvious curiosity. How do you teach something like this to people who aren't engineers? Anna's response reflected years of developing training methods that made complex techniques accessible to soldiers with diverse educational backgrounds. You don't teach the mathematics, you teach the mindset. When people understand that problems can have multiple solutions, they start looking for alternatives instead of just trying harder with approaches that don't work. The afternoon concluded with Anna's traditional closing message for new students, words that had been repeated by her graduates in briefings and training sessions worldwide. Some targets can't be reached with direct fire. Some problems can't be solved with conventional approaches. Some situations require people who understand the most effective path to success might be the one nobody else considered possible. As students filed out of the range, many carrying notebooks filled with calculations they were eager to practice, Anna remained behind to complete her own private ritual. She walked to the rocky outcropping that had served as her deflection point and placed a small metal marker in the exact spot where her bullet had struck 5 years earlier. The marker bore a simple inscription: Alex, physics worked. It was her way of keeping a promise made to a brother who had believed in solutions that others dismissed as impossible. That evening, Anna received a communication that reminded her why her work mattered beyond academic recognition or military advancement. A Special Forces medic named Thompson had used modified ricochet principles to deliver emergency medical supplies to wounded soldiers trapped behind enemy barriers in urban terrain. "Your techniques saved 3 lives today," Thompson's message concluded. They couldn't be reached with conventional methods, but physics doesn't care about conventional limitations. Anna filed the message with hundreds of others she'd received from soldiers, officers, and allies who had applied her principles to solve problems that extended far beyond marksmanship. Her techniques had been adapted for delivery of emergency supplies, communication devices, and tactical equipment in situations where direct access was impossible. But the most meaningful validation continued to come from families who would never know her name. Parents, spouses, and children whose loved ones returned home safely because someone had learned to think differently about apparently impossible challenges. Anna's story proved that real innovation often came from the most unexpected sources. The quiet engineer who seemed to struggle with basic skills while secretly developing revolutionary techniques. The civilian who understood theoretical principles better than combat veterans understood practical applications. The sister who refused to accept that her brother's death was inevitable given the limitations of conventional tactics. Her legacy lived in every soldier who learned to question assumptions, every student who discovered that understanding principles thoroughly could create possibilities that others couldn't imagine, every person who refused to accept that certain problems were permanently unsolvable. The silver bullet, inscribed for Alex, remained in its case, a reminder that some innovations were born from love rather than ambition, from determination to prevent others from experiencing preventable loss rather than desire for recognition or advancement. Anna Rothwell had proven that sometimes the most profound changes came not from dramatic gestures or brilliant insights, but from patient preparation, careful study, and a quiet confidence to aim away from the target while trusting science to deliver results that seemed impossible to everyone else. Her story belonged to anyone who had ever been underestimated because their methods seemed unconventional, anyone who had been mocked for taking indirect approaches to direct problems, anyone who had maintained faith in their preparation while others dismissed their efforts as impractical. In a world that often rewarded quick solutions and conventional wisdom, Anna represented something different: the power of understanding principles so thoroughly that new applications became possible when traditional methods failed, the value of patience and preparation over speed and assumption, the importance of looking for solutions rather than simply trying harder with approaches. That didn't work. 5 years after that first impossible ricochet shot, Anna continued teaching students to think beyond limitations, developing techniques that worked when nothing else did, and proving that innovation happened when someone refused to accept that certain targets were unreachable, certain problems were unsolvable, certain challenges were impossible to overcome. That was what Anna Rothwell taught everyone who heard her story. That understanding physics thoroughly could create tactical possibilities that others couldn't imagine. That some problems required people who were willing to aim away from targets while trusting preparation and principles to deliver success. That the most effective solutions often came from the most unexpected directions. Her legacy lived on in every student who learned to calculate ricochet angles, every soldier who applied creative thinking to tactical challenges, every person who discovered that the shortest distance between 2 points wasn't always a straight line, and that sometimes the indirect path was the only way to save lives. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.